Okay. Everyone will see.
But you have it in front of you too?
Yeah.
Or on the side?
Okay.
Is that okay?
Okay. Yeah, yeah, everything's fine. Yep, that's right. I don't know.
Let me try to find.
Okay. Like a quick quiz. Why do you need this talk? Are you expecting some technical stuff or what?
I want to see how you have done this one.
How we done what?
Single sign-on.
Well, in essence, it will be not so about how we do it, but what can be done and why we do it. Because single sign-on is not just sign-on. There are many other implications which comes after you do that single sign-on. So we will talk about what it is, and what can be done, how it can be done. It will be very, very quick walkthrough. Maybe. I don't know. I think so, and I have a PDF on your USB stick.
Oh, I don't know which one it is. I threw it back in the box. It keeps coming, comes and goes.
Yeah, yeah. Okay, so I don't know. Yeah, maybe. So yeah, going back to what it will be about. It will be about what we can do to achieve single sign-on. A very quick walkthrough on how we can do it. And mostly we will focus on why we do it and what comes next after single sign-ons. So what can we do in OpenEdX with regards to single sign-ons? Some standard methods like SAML or social auth. These two are pretty much implemented in OpenEdX, and you don't do coding for this. You just do some configuration. With SAML, it's just configuring via admin, Django admin, and social auth requires some JSON configuration, but again, it's not coding. And social auth supports silently more than 30 providers, and officially for Facebook, Google+, LinkedIn, and Office 365 from Microsoft. Almost standard approaches are OpenAuth. It's semi-implemented in OpenEdX. Thus, in order to implement OAuth 2.0 compatible identity provider with OpenEdX, you need to do some coding. Also, we have some custom things which are not compatible with OpenEdX OAuth flow. For example, those are LD API, VS Federation, and so on. Also, there are some tricks, not strictly speaking single sign-on, yet things like links through or identity synchronizations provides very same student experience to those who are students. So what is identity sync? Identity sync is when we get all the usernames and passwords from one system and just enter it into OpenEdX, and we can do so even for sure third-party system must have those passwords in plain text, and there are surprisingly huge amount of such systems. And precisely because they store it in plain text, their programmers are reluctant to add some like standard ways to do single sign-ons. Link through is an interesting technique, is when a third-party system creates links to various parts of your courseware. Maybe it's a course, maybe it's dashboard, maybe it's a specific unit, and embeds into a link some information about your user identity. Normally, for sure, it's encoded via some shared key. Thus, OpenEdX will get this information, extract it, and either log in or register this user and enroll this user on the fly into needed course. This technique is really interesting because you don't need to maintain sync of your users with the third-party system. You just provide links to course, and you don't care if they click it or not. You don't need to create a user beforehand in order to enroll it. Everything will be done on the fly. And workarounds. Workarounds are, in essence, third-party systems which provides you with standard authentication. You use those systems as an identity provider, and then you stick this system into whichever third-party system you want. For example, Auth0 supports VS Federation Auth. VS Federation is a slightly modified SAML from Microsoft, and it's hard to implement. Yet Auth0 supports it as an identity provider, as also as a service provider. Thus, you can use Auth0 as a man in the middle. You will log in into Auth0 via SAML, and Auth0 will then proxy your request via VS Federation into some third-party system. And it works flawlessly. Keycloak is the same, or it just, as far as I recall, open source, and you can host it on your own server. On a wiki page, you can find like many other implementations. That's basically what I've just said. So how it's done? For standard approaches, you just do a configuration, and everything works out of the box. For almost standard approaches, you create an authorization backend based on, so to say, template of the code. You have like example of the Auth 2.0 backend for social Auth. You can create the very same backend with like small customizations for like your favorite blog or whatever. Internally in Raccoon Gang, we are thinking on creating Auth 0.20 backend, which is generic, and put it into OpenEdX, so it could be also configured via admin panel without doing any codes. Custom scenes, which are like not supported by edX at all, requires custom Auth backend. All in all, it boils down to some relatively large effort. You need to, for sure, spend some time doing documentation on those systems. Then you create a backend, you test it, you deploy it to your system. In most cases, this is what is less, this is a least efficient way to do single sign-on, but in some cases you are forced to do so because, as an example, like Minister of Education of Saudi Arabia, they only allow you to use WES Federation, and they say we won't do anything else, so live with it. Okay, we have to do so. Very custom things are like identity sync, which is like a bad idea, but again, it could work for some cases, or link throughs. Link through, to my surprise, when it first came to my attention, I thought like, what a bad idea. Now I love it, because it really allows you not to think about identity synchronization. You don't need to maintain users of edX in sync with users of your current system. You just work with your users. You display links to your to edX courses in a specific way, and it works. Or you don't need to sync anything. If you delete some user, it gets deleted, and there is no way to log in to OpenEdX instance, because there is no way to log in other than go from your system via this specific link, and this link may include some expiration date, for example, like 5 minutes from creation or 15 minutes from creation or something. Workarounds are, in most cases, it's again just configuration. In most cases, you want to configure some SAML connection, and on the other side of this O0 or Kcloak or whatever, you configure any other connection. Again, you don't need any programming for this unless your other authorization protocol is not supported. But in this case, you want to choose O0 or Cloak or Kcloak or whatever. The downside is that it costs something. It's either a paid subscription to some paid service, or you need to host another platform in Amazon or whatever to actually host this software. Okay, and do anyone have any questions till now? Okay, so the hard part. Based on our experience, customers, like every single customer, want single sign-on. But when you start talking to them, it appeared that in many cases, it's not a single sign-on they need. They need to provide some sort of experience or to cover some business use cases, which are like the generic approach is, yeah, we do single sign-on and do something else on top of this. In some cases, you might think before going into single sign-on capabilities, and maybe you will see it's not needed, or it's needed in another, so to say, direction. For example, yeah, the generic definition of single sign-on is something to enable students to use their other credentials in your system. This could be not true. For example, in some cases, it's a better idea to have OpenEdX as an identity provider and make other systems single sign-on to it. For sure, it only works when you are new to online and you don't have any user base yet. Then maybe making OpenEdX a central point of your newly emergent infrastructure is a good idea. Besides, it will work eventually as an identity provider anyways, because Insights will do this. E-commerce module will single sign-on into LMS and so on. So yeah, the best question is where to store all the identities. And this is a business question, not a technical question. Some interesting things to think about also is OpenEdX, like by default, provides single sign-on capabilities to LMS. What about Staff? Should we also put this single sign-on into Studio? This is another project, so to say. And I believe soon enough, you will have some contributions from Microsoft, which moves all the authorization backends from LMS and enables them in CMS. It was done against Hawthorne Beta 1, so I think we are waiting for the release to provide those pull requests. But yeah, normal situation is that you provide single sign-on for your students, and your staff members need to log in with their regular OpenEdX passwords. Because you won't be able to provide SSO for staffs right out of the box. You need to think about it. Again, single sign-on rarely comes alone because enrollment management is the essence of all OpenEdX integrations. Someone needs to manage enrollments, and those enrollments can be managed again in many ways. One of the examples is for group-based enrollments. For Active Directory, AUS or LDAP or whatever, OpenEdX can query the group of a student, and if we have some mapping between group and list of courses which are assigned to that group. For example, a salesperson must have courses in branding, marketing, closing deals, for example. And if that person moves to some other group which corresponds to his or her role, into engineering, for example, we have other list of courses, and that could be managed like seamlessly. The other way around is that for sure we can provide enrollments API for that third-party system we are single sign-on in with. And with this, we will have that situation that in most cases, students are not yet existent in OpenEdX when they need to be enrolled on that third-party, something like student management system or HRM system or whatever. And with this, we also get these questions like, so we need something else, maybe user provisioning API and so on. So single sign-on is a buzzword which makes us think about many other things. Oops. So as soon as you define that you need single sign-on, your customer says, okay, we need single sign-on and so on. So these are like the examples of questions to ask yourself, your customer, and so on. So enrollments API, whether we need it or not, what we should do is invite-only courses. By default, enrollments API doesn't allow you to enroll someone into invite-only course. If we are going to use enrollments API, then user provisioning API, which is again not existent by default in OpenEdX, is needed, because in order to enroll someone, you need that someone exists in OpenEdX. as soon as we are single sign-on in with some corporate system, it's a good idea to ask whether we want to feed data back to that system. And this data might include like enrollments, grades, data APIs, which I believe we will see soon enough. Okay, and yeah, very important question in version of control, whether OpenEdX should query identity provider for enrollments instead of trying to create user and enroll this user into some courses to which in general case the student might not visit at all. Maybe OpenEdX may query the HRM system or whatever system for a list of courses to enroll this user, and OpenEdX can do this only when this user logs in. So this will be done when you need it, not just when you think you need it, but when you really need it. And the most painful question is mobile OS. If you are doing some single sign-on to anything, you need to think how you do this on mobile, because single sign-on on web is more or less easy. Single sign-on on mobile it's easy only in limited number of cases, and those cases are Facebook and Google Plus logins. Other than that, you need to think about how you will get something on mobile from your identity provider, and how you sync this in with your LMS in order to be able to query all the APIs which mobile app is using. This is so for this I don't have an easy answer. So each time it's something completely different, and it's painful. So yeah, before you are jumping in single sign-on capabilities with mobile experience, you need to have a clear understanding of how you will manage those identities between mobile application and your LMS. That's basically what I wanted to tell you, and hopefully this will raise next time you are going to do single sign-ons, it will raise some correct questions and so on. If you want to have some technical specifics, I would recommend you go to last year talk masterclass from guys from Appsembler. They do masterclass on SAML single sign-ons, right? Yeah, okay, that's it. So we have 10 minutes for questions, if you have any. Sure.
Something I just wasn't clear on. Did you say that SAML and social auth work in LMS, but not in Studio?
Yep. By default, all OS backends are LMS only, and Studio connects to OpenEdX user database. If you want to, so you need to do something in order to glue LMS OS backends to CMS. And we have pull request for this. It's not yet accepted. Was it so boring? Okay.
Do you provide solutions for multi-domain instances? Or it's have to be, for example, Esprit.something.com, or it may be a multi-domain
I don't really understand the question. Multi-domain solution of what? So in single sign-on, we have identity provider who owns the user data and service provider who actually tries to single sign-on into that identity provider. So which part is multi-domain? Okay, while you are thinking, on edX.org, I mean, multi-something, at least it's somehow connected. So you can have several authorization backends at once, and you will have like just several buttons like login with Google, with Facebook, with our corporate identity, with something else, and so on.
Provide a single sign-out. So when you access sign-out in edX, you are not sign out from Facebook.
Sign out, it depends on your authorization backend. So standard supports sign out. When you sign out in edX, if you do your authorization backend correctly, it will ping identity provider telling user wants to sign out. And it's up to identity provider to also sign out this user or not.
So I was just wondering, because we implemented single sign-on for 2 of our clients,
Mm-hmm.
with the upcoming programs in edX, how will provisioning work? Because typically you're restricted to the course, right? An access key to a course, and that's how we're providing single sign-on with our clients. Can we?
Restricted to a course?
Yeah, so we generate access key links
Uh-huh.
on a course basis and send it out to our clients.
I see.
Single sign-on and they come in.
Okay.
How would this work with programs?
As far as I recall, Xserious was like something before programs was a separate app which needs to be also like single sign-on from programs to edX. Now programs are just programs. You don't have a separate login attempt in order to list those programs. Answering your questions again, without much details, it's hard to say what are the restrictions of your approach, because normally single sign-on just allows you into LMS. As soon as you're in the LMS, you may enroll into anything which is open for enrollment. Same with programs. You can see all the courses. As soon as those courses are open, they are not invite-only, they are not paid, or whatever, or you pay for them, you may do so. From Open edX perspective, you are just a regular user as soon as you are logged in, and you may be logged in via like any authorization backend.
So are you saying the account provisioning is just done on the system, and then the enrollment process is a separate process altogether?
Open edX includes enrollments API, which in essence is a REST call where you say, okay, user A should be enrolled into course B. And this means that you do need to know a username of a user, Open edX username of a user which is to be enrolled. Thus, before you actually enroll this person, you need to create that person. If this person logs into a system at least once, it's already there. But if not, you need to create it. And in most cases, it is the case. User is created in some corporate identity provider. Then in some HRM system, some course is assigned to this user, and API pings OpenEdX saying like, you need to enroll this person into that course. OpenEdX for sure answers with, I don't know this user, it's not yet created. Because of this, we and Assembler guys have created, or I believe any OpenEdX providers has some sort of user provisioning API. which enables third-party system to create users. Sure.
Content management systems such as Drupal and edX.
Come again?
Content management systems.
CMS is Studio, where you create courses. LMS is learning management system, where you take courses or your students take courses.
Or CMS is Drupal.
Well,
User that has logged into the CMS and they want to get into learning management system.
mhm.
I was looking for that. I was wondering whether
Drupal.
module in Drupal and then that auth module sends tokens to edX. What does it do?
For Drupal, it supports OAuth 0.0 by default, and there is some plugin which enables Drupal being an SAML identity provider. Thus, you may use any of those, and it will look. Let me show you. Okay. This is, I don't recall, maybe it's Joomla, maybe it's Drupal or whatever. So, and here we have, sorry, courses and Opus Place. OpenEdX instance for this Opus Place scene. Here we configured SAML to talk to this site, and it looks like this. We are redirecting to opusplace.com from courses Opus Place. When we are logged in, we are redirecting back to where we were. That's it. I'm logged in. And yeah, if I log out, yeah, I still logged in here, so it's not yet implemented. But in most cases, service provider should not log you out of all other should not log you off from identity provider, because you might be logged in with this identity provider to other systems, and it's not what a service provider must decide. It's identity provider may think so.
So then we have to configure the content management system to be the identity provider, and then
If
the service provider.
yeah, this is the question. Where is the primary source of your students? If it's in CMS, then CMS must be identity provider and OpenEdX service provider. If not, you can do vice versa. Okay. That's all. Okay, thank you. If you have more questions, you're welcome to ask.
Вопросы есть, но после всех вопросов. А ты и так влез с вопросом просто потому, что остальные тупили, чтобы что-нибудь спросить? Не, ну с мультидоменностью там, ну такой вопрос тонкий, потому что как бы обычно же через операционную букву все эти задачи, которые на одном
Are you the next presenter? Are you alone?
Sorry? Yeah,
Are you,
just,
yes?
yeah, just
Okay. I'm gonna put a microphone on you. You're not gonna hear your voice in the room. It's for the people who's watching on YouTube. You can put it in your pocket
Okay.
or on your pants as you wish.
Okay.
How long? When do you? I can do this like for the 35 minutes and have it be for QA. But if you,
No,
if you know it runs 30, I can give you like.
I do run at 30, so let's kill me at 30.
Okay, great.
So yeah, give me the warnings
Yeah,
based
I'll give
off
you
of
warning
that.
at 20 minutes. But,
Okay, and I'm eyeballing this,
okay.
so
Cool.
cool. Sweet, thanks, man.
The camera filming, it's like,
Yeah.
like over here
Okay.
and go onto the whiteboard.
Okay, so we're okay, gotcha. And behind this. Okay. Yep. Yeah.
Send my best soldier. So
Oh,
enjoy. Good
cool, cool. Thank you, man.
right, everybody, we're going to get started. Please welcome Stephen Birch from Stanford.
Bonjour tout le monde. Yeah, my name is Stephen Birch, and I'm the technical lead for Stanford's OpenEdX project. And yeah, today I'm here to talk about our fork. At Stanford, we've diverged quite a bit on a number of features, on a number of pieces of software, edX platform, as well as a number of the supporting services. And I'm here to talk about that. I'll probably ramble, I'll probably rant. I have been told that I'm a curmudgeon before, so yeah, be ready for it. So I think to kind of to look at where we're at now, it's important to look at where we've come from. If we were starting from scratch today, we'd probably go about things differently. But as it were, yeah, we've been doing this a little bit longer than that. So to kind of just take it from the beginning. So in 1885, no, it's no. So we'll fast forward a little bit. So 2012, so the year of the MOOC, right? As we all remember. So this was a time where online education was really coming to the forefront, where people were realizing the potential for this. But as it were, this wasn't new for Stanford. This is something that we had been working on for years, specifically online education as well as distance learning too. And so yeah, so we'd had some experience with this. And it's interesting for me, so I've been with Stanford for 4 years now. As it were, I am the least experienced engineer on our team. So the two of our engineers who are here, Kevin Luo and Giulio Grata in the back, and David Adams, who's at home, they've been working on OpenEdX since before it was an open source project. In fact, they've been doing online learning with open source projects before OpenEdX was a thing. But so beyond that, you know, when we look at Stanford as a campus, OpenEdX isn't the only work that we've done. Stanford faculty members were pivotal in creation of a number of for-profit companies, Udacity, Coursera, companies you've probably heard of. And we owe a debt of gratitude, you know, to this work. This really helped get our coursework out there, really allowed us to experiment. There's one problem with that, and the issue there is when someone else writes the code, when someone else runs your servers, when someone else controls your data, you don't have users at that point. You don't control your own destiny. They have users. And so I think there was this realization within the university that we wanted to control our own destiny, that for us to be able to experiment, for us to be able to provide this valuable resource to our faculty members to research, to iterate, and to improve the learning on campus and off, we needed to control our destiny. And the best way that we saw to do that was to create our own software and to make sure that no one took the ball and went home. We knew that pursuing an open source path was going to be pivotal in that. Which is what brings us to Class2Go. So this is actually the learning management system that we developed in-house at Stanford just before my time. And so a couple of common themes you'll recognize here. This was open source. It was written and licensed under the AGPL v3. It was written in Python. It used the Django framework, very similar to the edX stack that we see today. And that's where, you know, people got to talking, realizing that there was this little upstart, you know, this offshoot from Harvard and MIT that was solving the same problems. They were using similar solutions. And we realized that we were duplicating efforts and we should join forces. So at that point, like I said, open source was important to us though. So at that point, Stanford agreed that we would sunset Class2Go, that we would set it aside and join forces with edX, but on the condition that software be open source. And so our engineers were pivotal in helping that happen initially. And then, yeah, so then we joined on with OpenEdX. And this is the part where I tell you that everything was gravy and we lived in harmony from then on. No, it didn't work out like that. So we've gone on to now fork, as I mentioned, a number of the key repositories. This is a little sample list. So this is everything from platform, certificates, configuration, notifier, forums, pattern library, proctoring, submissions, Aura2, a number of other XBlocks. We've even forked the Insights infrastructure at a time, though I think we've been able to peel all that out, and I think we're running stock at this point. But it's a lot. It's a lot to manage. We're a 4-person engineering team. It's a lot of work to take on. And so the reasons that we did that, at the end of the day, it's about delivering key features. It's about providing value to our instructors to improve the teaching that they can do. So the highlights here are a sneak peek or direct access, we call it. This is the ability for students to start browsing the course and start even taking the assignments, all without ever registering for an account, let alone even enrolling. And this has been great for everything from SEO and just removing friction to let people use the course. Inline analytics is a piece that we wrote a few years ago, which allows instructors to see breakdowns within each component in the LMS of how students have performed. If you're looking at a multiple choice question, you can see what percentage of people answered A, B, C, the whole way down. Track changes was a fork that we made to the Aura 2 peer response XBlock, and that allowed to, as a reviewer goes through and is making changes changes in feedback, they can actually directly edit the text that the users input. You can delete things, you can add things, and then it's displayed back in a graphical fashion. And then another one that we harp on a lot is YAML-based PDF certificates. We're one of the few people still using PDF certificates. I know Pierre talks about it a bit too. But yeah, this is big for us. We wanted to keep using it, and there was some friction, so we removed it, made it easier to configure. But yeah, so like I said, so these are some of the changes. So now why did we make those changes? At first we didn't fork the repos. In fact, we used all of the stock edX repositories. In the early days, we even had commit access to edX's repositories. And the little bit that we would do is we had our own little release branch that existed on edX's platform repository, edX West released. So you'll actually see some relics of this in a few places. If you're familiar with the configuration repo, you'll see that edX's playbooks are in a place called edX East. So they're specifying, it's because we were edX West. And that was the way that we differentiated between the two. But yeah, so then in mid to late 2014, the decision was made that for this to be a functioning open source project, we didn't want to have this special backdoor. We didn't want to have this extra access that no one else had, because the idea, right, of open source is that the work is judged based off the merits of that contribution itself, not that there's a big name attached to it. So we gave up commit access, and spoiler alert, it caused issues. So at this point we had to fork. And yeah, like I said, it's a lot of work. And on the one hand, I wish we didn't have to do it, but a ship in the harbor is safe, but that's not why you build ships. You build ships to go out to sea, to go through the rough waters, to find the spoils. And that's what we're able to do. That's why we put up with this difficulty. So why? Why don't we just land every feature with upstream at edX.org? The OpenCraft has talked about just merging everything, doing it in a way that it works for everyone. And that's great if it works out like that. The history of our 4+ years says that it doesn't always work out that way, though. The number one issue is just simply slow response times. Often waiting just months at a time, waiting for response on a pull request. And the issue is there are some things that aren't high priority. We can wait a little bit on some things. But it's very difficult for, like I said, for us, if the idea is that we're enabling research for Stanford faculty members, it's difficult for us to tell an instructor that feature that you think will help people learn better, we can't do it because we're waiting to hear back from Boston. That's a really hard sell. So sometimes we just have to go ahead, merge it ourselves. Maybe we'll land it at edX.org eventually, but we can't wait around. We've also had things that are just outright rejected by product. So I think there's often this myth that you can just massage things in such a way that it'll work for everyone. To just be really straightforward, we've had the inline analytics feature that I mentioned before. This was a piece of software that we had was greenlit by edX.org's product, by the head of product, the CTO we had buy-in from. We submitted a pull request, we cleaned things up, we responded to PR feedback, and then we're told that they didn't like what it looked like. It didn't look like the Insights project, even though Insights is a separate service. Our feature looked like the LMS because it existed within the LMS. I digress, though. We've also been told that things are confusing, that instructors won't use it, that they won't like it, which again, we scratch our heads at because these are features coming from Stanford faculty members saying, I want to do this, I need to customize this way. And yeah, so it's difficult for us to then turn around and say, you might think so, but somebody else thousands of miles away disagrees. So the reality is we have to just make those changes sometimes. So how did we do it? How did we go about it? To be honest, when we started, there was no plan. We just jumped in, we started making changes, and we made our changes directly in edX's files, right alongside it. And anyone that's done this before, you know it's a pain. Specifically merging changes from edX, from upstream, become really, really difficult. Yeah, it just becomes a bird nest of code, often taking weeks, if not months, to debug, to resolve these conflicts, and then often finding latent issues that don't come out till, again, weeks or months later. So we realized we had to find a path forward, and these are some of the things that have worked for us. The first thing we did, setting aside code, is we got organized. So this is a graph that actually Julio put together back in 2014 for us, and wrote a blog post that's on edX.org's blog, and they're kind of just detailing how we manage our branches. Granted, we have diverged a little bit from this diagram, but the general idea is by utilizing different branches, we're able to work on pulling in, integrating edX, code changes from edX.org while not slowing down our internal development. So once you start making changes, I think one of the big things is realizing when you don't actually have to make changes. If you don't need to, don't do it. I spent a lot of time pulling my hair out at one point. We had a lot of conflicts during a merge, and it's because someone at Stanford decided to hyphenate the word email in a bunch of places, or vice versa. I can't remember which way it went. I geek out on grammar. As any of my team members will tell you, I'm a pain when it comes to code review. But who cares? It's a hyphen. It's not worth it. I'd rather be writing software. I'd rather be shipping code. So don't sweat those details. Don't refactor. Don't do extra code cleanup unless you're going to land it at edX.org. Send it directly to edX if you're going to do that. If it's just for your fork, don't take on changes that aren't directly adding value. From there, so when you get to the point where you decide you need to make changes to the code base, the idea is to not change directly that code base, but to put that in an external package. If it's Python, we're talking about pip installing. If it's Node.js, an npm install. And you want to do this as much as possible, because if you're not touching edX's code, you won't have conflicts with them. The problem is there are a number of cases where that just doesn't work out. When you're trying to do running unit tests, things like that, if you have dependencies from the platform, it's hard to then isolate your code separately. We've also had issues rendering HTML templates from external external Django apps in the past. Talking to Dave Ormsby yesterday, he tells me that should work now, so maybe we'll check this out. So from there, now you're going to make a change. You realize you have to make it within the platform itself. You want to isolate those changes, keep them siloed away from edX as much as you can. If you place your changes in a directory that doesn't exist at edX.org, they're not going to touch it. You're at least guaranteed to not get conflicts in that area. And so for us in the edX platform repository, so now there's an openedx/core directory. We have openedx/Stanford. We house all of our changes in there, and it's basically a mirror of the top level directory. It has an LMS directory, CMS, the whole way down, and then we can isolate our changes there. And then from there, when we need to then integrate that, the idea is to keep those integration points as small as possible. Have a single import that then makes one call to one helper function. So for one, you're just minimizing surface area. It's less lines of code that are going to conflict with edX. But then it's also going to be easier to resolve. When you see it's that one thing that says, get Stanford's extra data, you know that that's specifically your thing, and it's easier to resolve. So from there, now another way we can go about integrating things is monkey patching code. So the basic idea is taking some piece of code that edX is using and on the fly swapping it out with our custom version. And so this is the thing we've been able to, this is actually a live example that we've been working on here, where we wanted to modify the footer that's displayed on every page. And we didn't want to override the entire theme because all we wanted to do was change the values. We didn't want to rewrite the markup, any of that. But we needed the links to be different. So basically, we take edX's function that gets the footer links, and then our function calls theirs, pulls some different values out, and then returns our data back. And the beauty of this is, again, the integration is next to nothing, but the edX's code is none the wiser. It doesn't realize anything different has gone on. Related to monkey patching then is you can also use decorators, which is a piece of Python functionality, which again does a similar thing. You take some function, modify it, change the behavior a little bit, and then return back this new value that has your new functionality with it. So there's a lot that we can do. There's a lot that we can kind of just roll on our own, make these changes, and it works out for us. But there are times where we need buy-in from edX, where we can make things a little bit easier. And so I think for me, one of the big things is just understanding how Git works, understanding where conflicts come from, understanding why making just a little change is going to be difficult on integration. Because I love Git, I love source control management, but it gets confused sometimes. If you look at the example on the left here, you have a variable. You set some value into it, but then you want to change it. We at Stanford want to uppercase it. You don't want to change that one line directly. You want to let edX do its thing, assign that value, and then come back along later and then modify what they did. The sample on the right is basically the same thing, but in reverse. The reason that's important is because you want to isolate changes to either be simply additive or simply removing things, but almost never a combination of the two. That's what's going to be much more likely for Git to be confused during the merge process. If you look at the example on the left, this is where we modified that one line. So Git actually thinks two different things have happened. Whereas on the far right, that we're just changing one thing. We're making one little addition on top. And then because this becomes problematic, because then if edX decides they don't want that value to be equal to the string foo, they want it to be equal to bar. Now when Git goes to resolve these conflicts, it sees, wait, edX changed this line, Stanford changed this line, I don't know who to believe, I'm going to throw up my hands and freak out here. And so that's what we want to remove. So now in this case, let edX make the change to that string, and then we'll come along and clean it up afterward. This is one of those things that my team is sick of hearing me talk about this. Add trailing commas everywhere that's syntactically possible. When you have collections, lists, sets, dictionaries, you can optionally add a comma at the end. Go ahead and do it. Again, the reason is this comes back to that example with Git. We don't want Git to be confused. So if we look at the example on the left here, when we don't have that trailing comma, that means when we come along later, we need to add that comma. So again, we're now changing two lines, whereas if we have the comma there to start, we are just adding one line in later. Another thing that helps too, so this is a bit of a contrived example, but as much as possible, having edX give us the room to tie in to be able to make these monkey patches. So here, we have a function that does some work, builds up a dictionary, and then spits it back. So granted, we could monkey patch this, we could, the whole function itself, though there are times where that's complicated, whereas if we just have a variable defined at the top level, we can go ahead, pull that value in, add something to it directly ourselves, and then again, edX's code doesn't know anything, is none the wiser. Another thing, so this is a thing that I've done some proof of concept on, I want to see us push more on, but splitting out common libraries, splitting out common Django apps, and actually removing them from the platform. Again, OpenCraft has talked about giving all your code to edX. We actually want edX to take code away from us. And there are a couple of big benefits to this. For one, when we make more and more of these packages pip installable, that means then that those times where we couldn't pull our packages out, now we can, because now those dependencies exist outside of the platform. It's also going to speed up build times, test times as well. There are methods or modules within Common Lib that have been unchanged since 2012. Yet every single time you run your unit test, you're retesting that. Despite, these aren't integration tests, they don't need to be run over and over, but yet we run them every single time. So instead of DevOps worrying about how do we make the tests run faster, let's just not run them at all. Another idea, so is the idea of not being overly strict, not being any more pedantic in the code than we need to. So this is actually a live commit here. This is something I merged to edX a couple months ago here. And basically what was happening was there was a test suite that was rendering some page and then looking for text on it. And it was looking for a couple of sentences. The issue was we didn't use that same copy text. We modified it a little bit at Stanford. We just wanted different wording. But yet the test suite would now fail because it was looking for every one of these sentences. The sentences didn't matter. All that mattered, you just wanted those couple of words that said, nope, this failed for whatever reason. The rest was superfluous. So just removing that, just what's the bare minimum? What do we actually care about? Let's check that. And then this kind of segues in from there is the idea of just writing informative commit messages. Again, this is one that I harp on. I think it's the reality is while we can do a lot to improve things, we can make it easier, we can remove the need to fork the code base as much as we can, but it is always going to happen. And this is where having the forensics, being able to audit commit messages and actually understand why some change was made makes a world of difference. When we see, oh, wait a minute, we have a conflict because edX changed a line, and then we changed this line too, but it's an engineer who's never worked with those systems before, and they're trying to figure out why did that happen. So we're not perfect either, but when we see a commit from edX that says, fix the bugs, What bug? Why was that an issue? What was important about this? And so again, this is a live commit message that I merged my first summer with Stanford. And there was a weird, wonky problem with how the Django system handled translations. And if we just said, fix the Django translations, it's opaque. You're not going to understand it later. And so this is now a commit message where when you're wondering when you're Git blaming, when you're wondering why did this need to happen, you can really understand it. So when you write commit messages, there's a lot of schools of thought on how you write effective commit messages. Google it, talk to me later. We include it in our onboarding docs even. And the idea is, communicate that why. It's going to save everybody time down the line. And yeah, like I said, we're going to do it. We're going to fork. This is the way that we're going to move forward. We're going to sail that ship out to sea. So yeah, just in closing, I shall be telling this with a sigh. Somewhere ages and ages hence, two roads diverged in a wood, and I took the one less traveled by, and that has made all the difference. Merci. Cool, yeah, I wanted to finish up a little bit early because I know it's the last day and there's apparently not free beer today, so, but we have more time for questions, if anybody's got something.
So could you elaborate a little bit more about how you manage the sort of overriding stuff that lays in the dedicated directory?
Yeah, so the basic idea is, like I said, so one of the things that I've just found really helpful is, like I said, the hierarchy, the file system hierarchy that we have there, we generally try to mirror what edX's looks like, right? It's like I said, we have LMS/Django apps, CMS/Django apps, and the idea is if you're monkey patching, a specific Django app, you use that same file structure. That way your imports even look the same and it's clear that this one thing maps up to that thing. And then you can tie the two together there. And then yeah, and again, there are varying levels of integration. Like I said, there are some things where we can just monkey patch this entire thing, swap it out with something else. Or sometimes it's just, it's one extra call. So then we just have that one line of integration in edX's end that calls out to our library of stuff. No, it's a manual thing at this point. I know, hearing from some of the work that Nimish is doing with some of the plugin infrastructure, I'm excited to see where that goes as far as like auto discovery of URLs files and things like that, and just automatically porting everything through. That would be a path forward for us to look at as far as tying those two together. Yeah.
So when you have commits that are out of place and they place correctly and they don't fail, how do you
Yeah, I mean, we generally try to have full test. I mean, just try to have full test coverage for most everything that we write to. Yeah, and that's so. The thing is, so as much as I rant on conflicts, right, and remove conflict, I think it's important to remember that conflicts are a feature, not a bug. Like I said, it is the source control telling you this changed and that changed. I don't know what you want me to do with this now. And so at least with this, I think no matter how you fork it, right, if you have any change, right, there are going to be times where something maybe doesn't result in a conflict, and it's not going to actually manifest itself. So that's where you're just going to have good test coverage. But at the very minimum, if you like I said, hopefully you still get that change, or so you still get that conflict. But then it's just that one line where you say like, foo equals bar, foo equals get Stanford bar, and then you can see, it's easier to just map the two together. Whereas if was this whole block of code stuck in there, it's hard to tell what parts you needed. Does that answer? Okay. Anybody else? Cool. Let's go.
Yeah. It was good.
Nice work.
Hey.
Ready to sail the ship?
Say what?
Ready to sail the ship?
Yeah, let's take that sucker out of the water.
Yeah, interestingly enough is that, like the way that you said, the central code is needs to have more flexibility. And that's what happens with a lot of open source.
Yeah.
They are the key decision makers, and most of the time it's just like, get up and that's what it is.
Yeah. It's a hard balance. I mean, governance models. I mean, how do you give up that control?
They don't. What are your plans?
So what?
What are your plans?
I'm gonna